Hello, and a very warm welcome to Inside the Deal. It might be a chilly December day, but you are hugely welcome around our fireside this morning. I'm Ollie Barrett, and it's an honour to be your host on behalf of Business Leader and finnCap Group. Welcome. If you're watching live, brilliant. Thank you for tuning in. And if you're just catching up as well, thank you. I hope you might share what you hear today far and wide. Our theme today is growth through sustainability. And let's be honest, it's the hot topic of the year, and quite rightly so. And these events would be nothing without our guests. And so without further ado, let's start to meet them. I'm going to bring them all up at once, and you'll see why I'm excited about our lineup today. Good morning, everybody. I can see at least one festive outlook. That's very good. Let me tell you who's here. I see Rob Pitcher. I go to you first, Rob, for the festive points. Good morning, Rob. Rob Pitcher, Chief Exec of Revolution Bars, known to probably everyone tuning in, Rob. I think you've got over 60 bars now. From your first one in Manchester, you now lead that business. Have I got that number just about right?
Yeah, 67 bars across every part of the UK.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us. I want to hear about you and a recent award you've picked up as well. Susan Hooper has a lot in her basket. She's got the most amazing portfolio. Good morning, Susan.
Morning, everyone. Hi.
Now, I think of you, Susan, as a serial non-exec director. You really are the real deal. You sit on the boards of the Rank Group, of Moonpig, moonpig.com, of Uber in the UK. But you also started Chapter Zero as well. What's that all about?
Chapter Zero is a pro bono organization under the auspices of the World Economic Forum, designed to help support, give the network necessary for non-execs and chairs to get up to steam on climate change.
Yeah.
And we started 2.5 years ago, now 1,800 members. So
amazing. Well, I want to hear what they learn from each other as well. Very good to see one of our sort of great British entrepreneurs on the call, Geoff van Sonsbeeck. Good morning, Geoff, or Geoff.
Good morning, and thank you, Ollie, for having me.
It's really good to see you. Now, Geoff, you are the co-creator and the chief exec of House of Balkan, which is home to two brands, one Balkan itself, named, I understand, after your good lady wife. So presumably she's the boss.
She definitely wears the trousers in this one, yeah.
But you've also created a phenomenal maternity brand called Isabella Oliver as well, which I know has been hugely well recognized, and not just in the UK, but increasingly globally.
That's correct, Ollie. And all of this 75% direct e-commerce, and we believe strongly in that direct model.
Yeah, thank you, Geoff, for joining us this morning. And Karri Vuori, my go-to deal maker. How are you today, Karri?
Very well, thank you, Ollie.
Now, just remind us, Karri, by the way, because finnCap Group, you do so many good things, but you're raising money, you're helping companies list, but your background is really in the deal-making space. You're helping companies get acquired, merge with others.
Absolutely. Primarily, we work with entrepreneur-owned mid-sized businesses, ranging up to £300 million, and help them achieve the biggest transaction of their lives. Internally within the organization, I sit on our own ESG committee.
Good. No, thank you. Well, thank you all for joining us. Now, I've got individual questions for you. I invite our guests tuning in to ask you questions throughout. But why don't we just go super pithy, as provocative as you like. If you could only say one thing about our theme today, Susan Hooper, growth through sustainability. If we only had a minute, what would you say? Let's get it out there.
It's probably just get on with it. We've been talking about it for years. We've debated the best way. We've now got it on the agenda, but we haven't got the traction necessary. We've got another 8 years and the clock is ticking. Just got to get on with it.
Yeah. And give me your brutal diagnosis of why the firms that aren't getting on with it are hesitating. What's the problem?
Well, it's an unprecedented problem. We can't pull a book off the shelf to know what the answer is. It's loaded with risks. Without taking risks, you won't make progress. Companies are built to deal with risks in a very positive way.
Yeah, I can see your fellow panelists nodding. Karri, if you only had one shot at today's topic, what do you want to get off your mind?
I'd say to not be afraid of ESG. in order to make an impact, you don't have to be a traditional impact business in, healthcare, education, plant-based foods, or something like that. Every business can make an impact, even in sectors that are inherently unsustainable. And Geoff will give us a very good insight into that, how you can make an impact in an unsustainable industry.
Yeah, no, that is great. And Geoff, how about you? What would be your first shot across the bows?
I think the first shot would be, if you don't do it, you are going to be left behind. And it's not just existential for the planet, but the change we're seeing in the sustainability revolution has the speed of the digital revolution.
100%. And to Karri's point, can that be how can that be overwhelming? I mean, sometimes there can be so much jargon. I mean, how do you cut through that?
I think just look at the data, and I've been in this now for many years, and probably on the vanguard in the industry. And every day I'm surprised by how little I know. It's always a step backwards when you learn more. But don't lose sight on the journey. You're definitely learning, and as long as you're going forward, it's good.
Well, on being in the vanguard, Geoff, you picked up an award recently in COP26 in Glasgow. Congratulations. Presumably you've taken some flack as well. What form has that taken?
A lot of flack that it's greenwashing, that we're doing it for commercial ploy. So these are the obvious ones. And if we're serious about decreasing the production volumes and the industry as such, how can we be propagating a sustainable fashion? So I think these are all quite naive comments, and you can deal with it relatively easy. But it's really down to the consumer and stakeholders not fully aware yet of the gravity and the choices that need to be made.
Yeah, well, hopefully that tide is changing. Rob, give me what's top of your mind on this theme.
Yeah, look, I think we are a young business. We're targeted at consumers sort of under 30. It's very front of mind for them. And I guess I agree with some of the other panelists. You need to get on with it, otherwise you're going to get left behind. So we've just started. I guess we're 67 bars. We're a sort of medium-sized enterprise in the hospitality sector, but we've been able to just start making changes, and we're seeing a really positive response. You can't run too far in front of your guest, otherwise you'll end up frightening them off. But actually, government makes massive pledges. Consumer wants to recycle plastics in their recycling at home, etc. But they expect business to be the ones that are making the changes. But you can't run too far ahead of your consumer. So there's a balance to be had. But if we're going to fix it, as Susan said, by 2030, it's business that are going to make the difference.
And do you think, Rob, that it's on both of your minds, you and the customer, but it essentially goes unspoken? Or do you actually exchange about this? Do you have real conversations about sustainability?
Yeah, I mean, we run bars, so actually we're here to sort of take away the daily stresses of people's grinds. And so the last thing you really want to be reminded of when you come to a bar is that the planet's going to end in catastrophe unless we change something. So you have to do it in a very subtle way. So something that we've just done actually is we've removed the passion fruit out of the Porn Star Martini, the UK's #1 selling cocktail.
I saw that. Was that in the Times?
Yeah, it was in the Times yesterday. Yeah, and look, that's real change. Yeah, well, I guess it's real change. It's removing 100 tons of carbon. We air freight 36 tons of passion fruits from South America every year to cut them in half, drop them in the top of the drink, and then throw them in the bin. It adds no flavour. So we've replaced that with a edible rice paper that's got a print of a passion fruit on it, but says saving the planet one passion fruit at a time. It's a simple message. If you just remove the passion fruit, the guest is going to complain. If you put a message on there that basically helps remind them that this is why we've done it, the guest and the consumer is moving with you without you ramming it down their throat that we're going to have to change. Otherwise, we're all going to end in a bad way.
Love it. Great example. What I've got is a few questions for you each individually. Why don't I pick on Geoff to start with, if I may? Thank you, everybody. I'll bring you back very shortly. But maybe Geoff and I just have a brief chat. Geoff, as Rob was talking there, it was making me think that actually I wonder if businesses have a role to play in actually educating customers, or is that going a bit too far?
I think Rob is right. You need to be very careful to not run ahead of it. I think there's a lot of truth in the Extinction Rebelliousness too and what we do. But if we want to really make change, we need to bring the customer with us. But I strongly believe, and I often almost joke about it, my real line of business is education. I'm here to teach the customers that what to pay attention for, how to cut through the noise and the greenwashing. And importantly, and truly important, that they really don't need to make compromises. Our garments are as lovely in feel and look and touch and everything, but they are so much more responsible. And once they've figured that, and you've taught them to check the care label and to go and ask other brands, there is a bit of a carrot and a stick. The other brands are either going to follow or they're going to be left behind.
Right. So how do you educate your customer without patronizing them or boring them? Give me a top tip.
Well, I think this is the biggest challenge we have. It's really how to be careful on that fine line. And you're still a brand, so you still need to ooze about fashion and the things that are important and how they feel. But it's the storytelling, and I think that's the key word. We all the time give them, as part of any brand message, we will give them a bit of storytelling. Did you know? Are you aware? Have you thought about? And I'll give you a good example. We're in John Lewis in so many stores, and convention is that you have big swing tickets hanging from your garments. We looked at it very different. We said this is an opportunity to communicate with the customer. And almost every swing ticket is different. And
so can you say what that is, Geoff? Just so I don't understand. A what ticket?
It's called, it's a swing ticket. It's basically a piece of cardboard hanging from the garment, from the hanger. And it's normally just saying the brand. And in our case, it says the brand with how good it is or how we measure it, why it is important. And we find that customers almost go around the floor to understand more of these messages. And that's how we teach them. And be consistent, but approach it as storytelling, inclusive.
Yeah.
Don't tell them.
Now, my more specific question for you, Geoff, is around how you are formed as a business, as House of Balkan. You're a B Corp. Just very briefly, and I'm confident our viewer will understand the gist of this, but briefly remind us of what that really means in practice, and tell us why you're a B Corp and not a company limited by shares.
Well, we are a company limited by shares.
And why you're more than that.
We are more than that, exactly. Convention, historically, the economic concept is about the supremacy of the shareholders. And maybe because I'm Dutch, but certainly because I'm very clear about my purpose, we find it's not just the shareholder. You must consider a broader range of stakeholders, whether it's the people that you employ or work with down your supply chain and or the planet. And B Corp as a principle is seeking this kind of systemic economic change to think about people, planet, and profit. We call that the 3 Ps in equal balance. And we find that very important to embed that in our principles.
Yeah, and it's not just wordplay, is it? You have fundamentally had to change your articles. Beyond that, how are you held accountable? What gets measured? What has to be different?
It's well, it certainly is not, often referred to as you cannot cheat or greenwash a B Corp status. It is incredibly diligent. And it has, in my case, I'll give you an example. When you embark on it, there is more than 300 different questions that are very thought-provoking. And they're meant to get the whole organization to think beyond the immediate team, but look about supply chains, upstream and downstream, and to think, how are we really going to solve these questions like a riddle? And they're also developed in a way that they help you to think about how to embed them in your immediate governance, your reporting, your KPIs, your suite. But the main starting point, as you said it rightly, commit to it. Be serious about wanting to be a different kind of business. And the simplest thing, which is also the first thing you need to do for B Corp, but really any business can do this tomorrow, even if they're daunted by the B Corp journey, change your articles, embed it in what I call a mission log, that you're no longer just for profit stakeholders, shareholder stakeholders supremacy, but you consider the others. And then your fiduciary duty will do the rest.
Got it. And just finally, for the guests tuning in, scratching their head going, I wonder if we should think about becoming a B Corp. What's the number one question that they could ask themselves to help them understand whether this might be for them? Let's just plant the seed today.
I think you must be clear about purpose. If there's still too many businesses out there that I fear that are not very clear about the purpose, it's a difficult question that involves too many stakeholders. You must answer that question first. And from there, B Corp is the most effective and efficient journey, if you like, to start delivering on it.
Yeah, well, kudos to you for pioneering. You're the highest rated fashion B Corp, certainly in the UK, maybe even further afield. Geoff,
Not yet in the rest of the world.
The other quick question I've got for you is basically you are also innovating around whole business models for your industry. Just give us a couple of clues about what you've been exploring, because this is fascinating.
It is. It came a little bit at the same time as becoming a B Corp. The epiphany how bad the fashion sector was, and for those that don't know, I mean, every second a truckload of garments is going to landfill or incineration, and it is a shocking stat. We consume virtually twice as much as we did 10 years ago, and we wear them less than half than what we were 10 years ago. So these are horrible stats. Fast fashion is everywhere. And we realized that we had to change the model, not just tinker with it, but radically rethink it. And the biggest thing we did is to move to a circular model where we embrace and even develop responsible fibers and talk very much, provide clarity about the provenance all the way down to the farm, back to the consumer, to establish a level of traceability and personalization. But we also focus a lot on care and repair, because that's where a third of the damage happens to the planet. And then we have embraced at large scale the sharing economy. So we have across both brands secondhand and rental. And we will have subscription in maternity wear around Christmas this year as a nice present. And at the end of it, we recycle loads of fabrics back into new fabrics for us. So proper circular.
Yeah, and a proper leadership in that space. So we've got subscription coming down the line, renting clothes, sharing clothes, really building that community. Thank you, Geoff. If you're just tuning in, Geoff van Sonsbeeck is the founder of House of Balkan, co-founder. Let's bring back up Susan Hooper. I've got questions for Susan with her portfolio of roles. Susan, tell me what you think the role of a non-exec can be in influencing and supporting a board on this journey.
It's probably one of my favorite topics, actually, because I think often even NEDs underestimate the influence that they can have on a board. But to be perfectly honest, it's part of the job. It is section 172D even for the environment. It's the only paragraph I know in the whole thing. So, but it is our duty to be concerned about the future of the company, and also about the many stakeholders, as Geoff was just saying too. So it's not just what they can do; it's what they are meant to be doing.
So, what is the nature of your involvement then? Are you advising, challenging? Are you educating? Help us understand, for any non-exec tuned in, but also for the board member, how they get more from their non-exec from that relationship.
Well, it's we are there to oversee the direction that the company is taking. That can be strategy, that can be financial accuracy. Yes, you advise because you sit there with your experience, and you often do have the opportunity to advise. But it's very much the CEO runs the company. The board is there to oversee, make sure it's being done in the proper way, the governance, the G and ESG, and increasingly challenge whether the direction is in the interest of the long-term value of the company as well. Yeah. So a bit of everything, really.
And what have you learned on the education piece? If you're thinking, actually, I'm not confident that my colleagues on this board understand enough about the problems that need solving, what do you do?
Well, first and foremost, I tell them to join Chapter Zero, become a member. It costs nothing. It's a source of information, and you'll be reminded every month that what's going on and what you should be learning about. I don't think you can force anyone to learn it, but increasingly, there is the Chapter Zero, but there's also investors who are demanding much more involvement with regards to ESG. And even the customer groups are active as well. So there's pressure from all sides now.
Well, what we're going to do, Susan, is we're going to get some specific questions about the wins, the big wins, and the future challenges. But you've reminded me on that investor angle. Let's ask Karri Vuori what he thinks about this, because Karri, as I say, you're a deal maker to so many different trusted sort of entrepreneurs. Here's an overly blunt question. Does taking all of these things seriously, sustainability, yes, does it impact the value of a business?
Yes and no. So you are not going to get a higher valuation as a business purely because you're a B Corp or you report on your ESG and so on. But what it does do is put you in the shop window. There's a huge inflow of capital coming into ESG and impact funds now. There's a massive scarcity of deals that suit their parameters that they're looking for. And that scarcity is driving up valuations. So if you can identify what your impact is, measure it, and demonstrate what you're doing, how you're doing it, and why you're doing it, then that is what will drive valuation, not just having an ESG framework in the first place. The critical thing in my mind as well is that you've got to understand what it is that you're impactful in. If you're a fashion company, for example, you need to be looking at the E and the S. You know, the two areas where you are absolutely categorically the most impactful in is in environmental sustainability and in workers' rights. If you claim that ESG is important to your business and you're reporting in your annual report about body image and your board composition and so on, all of those are highly recommendable and laudable things to be doing. But if you're ignoring the environmental sustainability or if you're ignoring the workers' rights, then you probably missed the point of the exercise.
Yeah, understood. And on that, the S, of course, being around society as well. And when you talk about that scarcity, Karri, what is it that these new so-called impact investors struggle to find? Where is the gap?
There simply aren't enough businesses out there that fit the parameters that they're looking for, because companies have been very, very slow at taking on board the ESG agenda. Everyone's talking about it, but what we really see is, particularly amongst entrepreneur-led businesses, that there is a fear. There's this alphabet soup of different frameworks. What's appropriate? What's applicable to us? You know, what should we be looking at, and how should we be doing it? And that's the message we're trying to get across. And we're increasingly introducing our clients to ESG consultants at the start of a transaction, so they can identify where that impact is.
Is your theory, though, Karri, that the substance just ain't there, or that the businesses might have all of the good stuff, they might be the real deal, but they haven't found a way to translate it and explain it to the investor?
Absolutely, the latter point. You know, going back to the very first thing I said on this panel today, it's you don't have to be a vegan foods business or an education business or healthcare business to be impactful. So one business that is really doing it right that I'd like to call out is Bloom and Wild. It is hard to identify an industry less sustainable than what they do. They are growing flowers, cutting them in Kenya, flying them overnight to Europe so that we can have pretty flowers in our homes. Now, we're going to ask ourselves the question, do we want flowers in our homes? Do we want fashion, for that matter? You know, I think the answer is always going to be those industries aren't going anywhere. Therefore, you've got to look at what you do and how you do it. So in an industry that has 40% wastage, 40%, absolutely staggering. So almost half of all flowers that are grown and cut in Kenya to come and make our homes look prettier are just wasted. They're thrown away. When you look at Bloom and Wild, Aaron reliably tells me that they've got the wastage percentage down to 7% by looking at their systems and doing things the right way. They've identified their impact. You know, they're in an unsustainable industry, but they are an impact business.
Right. Very good shout out, Aaron. Extraordinary entrepreneur. Thank you, Karri. Moving on from STEM subjects, why don't we get Rob up? Because, Rob, can I ask you, Rob Pitcher, Chief Executive of Revolution Bars, let me put it like this. All bars around the world, almost bar none, have had an unbelievably turbulent 18 months. How do you keep our today's subject of sustainability to the forefront of your mind when, frankly, you're going through this unbelievable crisis?
Yeah, it's a very good question, and it has proved challenging throughout the last 18 months, 2 years. And look, you know, we had an option to focus. I guess the close down, we weren't doing what we normally do and delight guests every day. It provided the small team that was still working in the business the opportunity to actually advance the business on some agendas that we wouldn't normally get the time to do. So actually, we took the time not to just develop our brands, but also to really focus on the ESG agenda and to go, actually, how can we make a difference here? So as when we reopen and we relaunch the business, we do it in a more sustainable way than when we entered the lockdowns at the start of 2020.
So what's an example? What were they thinking about? Because I like that frame of space to think and plan.
Yeah, exactly. So where were the points, almost talking about being an impact business? We produce waste, we open bottles, they go in bins, they go in recycling, we produce food, some of it gets eaten, some of it gets thrown away. So we looked at the pinch points in the operation to go, well, actually, the real stress point is actually behind the bar at peak service, where splitting waste into different recycling at that point is the easiest thing to do, or the cleanest thing to do, because once it goes out the back, it'll be very hard to start disaggregating it all. So we put in recycling stations behind the bartender stations, so it's very clear, rather than everything going into one bin. It was very clear, very easy in hand. So just small little improvements has raised our recycling levels, and that's a great point.
No, good. Well, leadership that I'm sure our guests will agree takes a lot of bottle as well. Rob, what was the Green Apple Award for? Tell us about that.
Yeah, so we won Green Apple Gold Standard Award for Hospitality, and that was in recognition. We've got individuals in each of our bars, and I guess this is where it's key, where this is employee-led, so they are super keen to get behind this. So in each of our bars, we've got a role called a Zero Hero. They are tasked specifically with removing all kinds of waste from our business. So wherever they see an opportunity, they're empowered to make the change, but also they come together and share that across the business. So the sort of net result of that is that we've had a 19% reduction in our use of utilities since 2017. And that was, I guess, that's where we won the award for that recognition.
Fantastic. Congratulations. Question: if you devolve power down to the grassroots, how do you also ensure that the lessons from the front are shared through the wider organization?
Yeah, and I guess that is involvement from a senior level down to that grassroots team. So we've got a network approach effectively. So they are pulled together across the country onto calls like this, and actually technology's really helped us to get those opinions in. So yeah, and then we just make sure that that's road tested and then shared across all 67 bars.
Yeah, fantastic. No, thank you. Let's bring everyone back together because we've got some questions coming in. Thank you, everyone, for those sort of different perspectives. Here's a question. It's quite a big one. Thank you to our viewer who sent this in. Keep your questions coming in. This is Inside the Deal with business leader and finnCap. Progress is often measured through growth, particularly through GDP, financial metrics. Do you think it's time to consider progress in a different way for businesses? Susan Hooper, this will have been on your mind more than once.
Yeah, and it's a massive question. I absolutely don't claim to know the answer of it, but I certainly have spent quite a lot of time thinking about it. I have the interesting experience of sitting on a number of companies where growth is either good or bad. So a water company, we're being rewarded now for reducing per capita consumption, which is a bit of a perverse kind of anti-capitalist situation, and yet that is a good situation. You know that there's going to be more demand than supply. You need to reduce. And this is coming back to helping educate customers as to why you need to reduce your consumption. I think, though, the real challenge will be in the industries like the hard to abate industries. Do you reward reduced growth? Do you stop, flying? What is the alternative until you can get to a sustainable future? So I don't think it's going to go away, but I do think it's going to. There's plenty of growth coming from the new innovations and from the companies that are getting it right.
Yeah, it's a good point, isn't it, Geoff? We might not need a reboot, but we certainly need a rethink, don't we?
We totally do. And it's a loaded question, right, about GDP. I think coming also back from COP26, what I hear a lot of the private sector is that we need to think about a rewiring of the global economic system. Now, what that will mean, we'll see. But as a collective, we certainly are overconsuming, overproducing, overconsuming. And if we were to take into account the real externalities, and of course we focus on carbon, But there is also water to consider. Susan, thank you for flagging it. It's going to be the next battle, I think. We start thinking about what that means in your real P&L for carbon taxes and water taxes. The world is changing dramatically. And I think we are shifting to look, for instance, at the Gen Zs. They don't own the things, they just share the things. They're not as materialistic as we are. So I think what that will mean for GDP is going to be a very interesting question. It's going to be more balanced.
And we hear, don't we, Geoff, a lot about greenwashing. What was an example of greenwashing? Because it must wind you up because you have committed yourself to being the real deal.
Oh, it's very annoying. But having said that, I mean, I always look at where did the greenwashing come from? Because, and I alluded to it earlier, it is such a complicated area that a lot of greenwashing turns out to be naivety. And I'm kind of okay if you try to do the right thing, but you got it wrong, and we'll point it out. And it's like, here's your yellow card, be careful. If it's done for commercial ploy, that's of course a very dangerous area. And it's happening en masse. Fortunately, UK legislation is coming out in January, which will come down hard on greenwashing with unlimited fines, is my understanding. So we'll see a clearing up in the landscape. I'm cautious too that what we should not get is that people don't want to talk about the good things anymore. We just need to be a very careful balancing act, which is down to transparency.
No, I get that. And I see you as a future diplomat, Geoff, and slightly avoiding my question of an example. Now, I'm not expecting you to name a brand, but give me a real example of something that you said, that is just not cool, and that gets in the way of what we're trying to do here.
We see now customers focus and brands focusing on the garments, on the yarns, which is fine. It's an important area, how responsible it is. And the true measure would be, like we have, 92% of every fiber we use as a collective on a weighted basis is scientifically proven to be responsible. Yes. What you see happening in the market is people saying 70% of our garments have responsible fibers. That could be the neck label. It means nothing.
Right. No, brilliant example. So Rob, what's an example of something just amongst us friends and a few hundred tuned in live? What's an example of a challenge that you continue to face? Because, I want to get some quick wins notched up on the scoreboard, but there must be some things which just are tough to shift.
Yeah, I think for a consumer-facing business such as ours, look, 90% of our emissions are all in scope 3. So we can do as much as we can. We're fully renewable from electricity supplies. We've done that. We're doing passion fruits. We're doing all those things. We can only get at really 10% of the footprint.
Now, let me pause you, Rob. Forgive me, just for our viewer. I'm sure they know this, but scope 3 takes us beyond your organisation into the supply chain. Anything else we should just be thinking about on scope 3?
Yeah, it's exactly that. Exactly that. Everything that's downstream of you, that's come through your supply chain, you inherit all of that carbon as well. So, and I guess for a consumer-facing business, that is the biggest challenge is working with your supply chain in order to find out how they can remove carbon out of their footprint in order to benefit you as well. And I think what the biggest thing is unlocking those partnerships. That's what I would say that we found is as soon as you start working with your supply chain, suddenly you find out that they're doing things you weren't aware of, and together you can accelerate them.
Right. So what I want to understand from you, Rob, is what is the nature of your power to influence scope 3 emissions? Is your carrot more useful than your stick?
It is definitely a combination of both. So we have very quickly formed partnership working with companies such as Diageo in the UK and others that are much bigger than us. Once you unlock it, suddenly you can partner with them very well, and they're extremely helpful to us. But equally, there is a bit of a stick by us saying to various suppliers, look, we know this isn't on your agenda yet. Contracts up for supply in 18 months' time. This is going to be really high on our agenda when that contract comes around. So we're happy to help you in the meantime, start the journey, because when we started, very scary. Where do we start? There's lots of jargon, don't understand it all. So we're happy to help them. But if you're not on the journey, you're very unlikely to be renewing that contract.
Yeah, but because actually, Karri, and Geoff has hinted at this, actually the tide is shifting. There are some pretty hefty regulations, and the UK might actually take a lead on this. Who knows? We can discuss that. I just wondered to what extent the firms you talk about rather, and are aware of this wider landscape, because these are big levers coming into force.
I think it depends largely on the size of the companies. So for our sort of 120 quoted clients, this is much more at the front of mind at board level, and there is this debate around which methodologies do we apply, which frameworks do we work within, and so on. And that's the challenge, that's the difficulty. Whereas with sort of smaller entrepreneur-led companies, there's a sort of almost fear of, hang on, what if we come out looking rubbish here? And our answer to that is always that nobody's expecting you to be perfect on day one, especially for smaller companies. But it's about understanding where your starting point is, benchmark that, and then improve and measure the improvement. And once you've gone through that exercise, you also start to learn around what are the things that have real impact, and what are the things that Susan and Geoff have talked about, and Rob around actually this is just greenwashing by accident. Not intentionally, but by accident. But unless you've delved into what your impact is, what you're doing, and measuring it, then you don't know.
Yeah, and in terms of a starter pack, kudos to finnCap Group for putting out your scorecard. 5 simple questions, 5 in E, 5 in S, 5 in G, to get you started. I definitely commend that to you. Go to finnCap's website for that. Susan, I'll give you an example of something I'd like your take on. Offsetting. Isn't that a bit like a swear box? It's all right. I can keep swearing. I'll just keep putting money in.
Well, you were asking about, an example of greenwashing. Any company which has 100% offsetting as their ESG strategy or their environmental sustainability strategy, in my mind, that's offsetting. I do believe that there is a role for offsetting, but not until you have a clear idea of what your footprint looks like, how you're going to reduce the emissions in your business such that it will be zero over time. And if there's a gap that remains, I think anyone who's not at net zero is still contributing to global warming. So you need to work out how to fill that gap.
It's a good point. And, John Elkington would say, despite having coined the term triple bottom line, maybe sustainability isn't the right word. We should be talking about either regeneration or degeneration. You're on one side of the line. Make a choice.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I actually believe that, especially with the hard to abate companies, you need to deconstruct the way your business is run and reconstruct it, removing those inputs that are no longer sustainable, and work out how it works after that.
Well, I'm gonna put you slightly on the spot, Susan, because when Karri was talking about sending flowers through the post, I was thinking a little bit about greetings cards. So how does such a simple, joyful business take its responsibility seriously? And I'm asking you to reflect on Moonpig and some of the choices that you've seen the board take.
Well, it's been a really interesting experience because, as you know, Moonpig listed at the beginning of this year. And at that point, there was not a clear environmental strategy. Clearly, being a listed company, they needed one. And in one respect, I was a bit frustrated that there wasn't one. But nonetheless, there wasn't one. We worked on it together. And the most obvious thing is paper, because the cards are made out of paper. And they've made some very firm commitments to get to net zero by 2025. And the first thing we work on, because it's self-evident without knowing what the footprint is paper. And very much like the others have said, we used external consultants to verify, to make sure that they're measurable, that they are robust, and map out what needs to happen going forward. We don't know everything from day one. We don't know our scope 3 yet. One of the most complicated aspects, particularly for that business, and probably the most impactful as well. But there's a commitment to finding that out and getting a clear roadmap about how to deal with it such that the target is achieved. And this comes a bit back to greenwashing, though. It's like, it doesn't mean, if you don't know how you're going to get there, doesn't mean you're greenwashing with what you're doing now. You've just got to get started and learn what is right, what isn't right, and adjust.
Yeah. Well, let me get either Geoff and or Rob's take on this, because some might say that if you set a big goal and you put it out there publicly, even though you have no clue how you're going to get there, then you're a fool. Others would say that is leadership. What do you say, Geoff? Rob?
Well, I certainly think it's leadership. I think it was mentioned earlier, probably by Susan, that CEOs are uncomfortable when they need to set targets that they don't know how to deliver. But the planet, it doesn't give us that luxury. We need to be very bold. We have 7 to 8 years left to really make a serious change. So be in there bold and just courageous, if you like, and work together. And I think this is the big thing I see happening in the last year and accelerating is businesses to collaborate. To, like Rob was saying, and we found exactly the same, if you start exploring your scope 3 upstream and downstream, you will find that they want to work together. You learn things you didn't know. You can steer each other in the right direction. And you generally also find inefficiencies that you were not fully aware of, which actually help you to become a better business. Yeah. So collaboration is absolutely key. And I actually put it out there because we're so ahead in fashion. I said to my competitors, I will compete on product and service, but I will not compete on when it matters to the planet. And I'm serious about it. So call me and I'll share my experiences.
But you're going to have a problem though, aren't you, Geoff? Because you are leading in this. There's going to be part of you that needs to stick to the knitting quite literally. And part of you could spend your whole life educating others. How are you going to decide?
Well, that's a good question because the sector is too big, full stop. So the inconvenient truth is that we need a serious downsizing. And many entrepreneurs, CEOs at least, are, like Susan alluded to it earlier, are not ready yet to make the change needed. They will naturally be left behind. I think fast fashion is going to see a fast change too. So I think some of these sectors will come under good pressures. If people are bold enough to knock on my door to ask for help, I think they got their heart and intent in the right place.
Yeah, and I'm sure they already are from all different sectors. Rob, you're running a listed company. You put your head above the parapet and declare, guess what? We're going to go plastic neutral by, I'm guessing, let's say 2024. I'm making it up. That's a commitment. You're going to be held to that. That must put you off making it in the first place if you don't know how you're going to do it.
Look, partly out of naivety and partly out of wanting to do the right thing, we were sort of charging towards setting ourselves a target of net zero by 2025. We then educated ourselves a bit more, and to pick up on Susan's point around greenwashing, we could have done that, but there was far too much offsetting involved. So we wrote and submitted a science-based target that delivers us to net zero before 2030, giving us 5 more years. We're taking what we would have spent on offset and investing it in more and more technology to take more and more or become more and more efficient through our whole business. So give ourselves 5 more. It wasn't a race. Well, it is a race, but getting there too soon and just offsetting is greenwashing. So we pushed that out by 5 years, made it 2030, put the science-based target. And I guess that's what I would encourage businesses to do. The science-based target is what it says on the tin. It's based in science. You're held to it. Now, it is a scary thing because we don't know fully how we're going to get there, but we're committed to it.
Right. Well, look, I mean, Susan, Rob is a new friend. We are supporting him and his colleagues. Has he made the right choice? Because isn't there a school of thought that says, Rob, forgive me, that says actually that 2025 target would have got you not net zero. Yes, it would have involved offsetting, but frankly, deal with it.
I absolutely support what Rob has said. I don't see any other way around it. And by the way, 2030 to get to net zero is already a lot quicker than many others, which are more at 2050, which is just like, well, not in my lifetime, So no, I absolutely subscribe to that. I do argue, though, that emissions reduction alone, and especially given the pace of reduction that we've seen to date, is simply not going to be sufficient to get to net zero by 2030. So offsetting has a role to play. If you have a business like Rob clearly has that can get to net zero through emissions reductions and rejigging the business, brilliant, go for it. But there are a lot of industries or companies out there that cannot.
Yeah. So let's just start to talk. I want to talk more about how we measure all of this. But Karri, before I do, can we just sort of come back to this idea that any of these good deeds are in any way connected with the overall success of a business? You see hundreds of businesses. What's your thought on that?
This isn't 100% truism, but on the whole, what we see is that businesses that are doing the right thing and are doing good actually have a commercial benefit to it as well. The starting point for so many people is thinking, oh my God, this is going to cost us loads. It's going to cost us in measurement. It's going to cost us in the remediation actions and so on. But I think, and this is probably something Rob is seeing as well, is the consumer.
Hang on, Karri. What are remediation actions? Karri, what are remediation actions?
In terms of reducing your impact rather than not reducing your impact, but reducing the environmental damage rather than offsetting. Right. Same as building a new building rather than putting a windmill outside it. Let's design out the wastage. So and I think Geoff probably has some good real life examples of the consumer wants to see this. You get a bit of a green premium to it. And in an industry where, for example, customer acquisition cost has gone up substantially since the reopening of society across e-commerce, and a lot of other e-commerce businesses are coming out with profit warnings and really struggling, a business that's doing the right thing in Bouken is actually seeing everything going the right direction at the moment.
Right. Well, tell us about that, Geoff, because our skeptical viewer is thinking, they're brilliant brands. Geoff comes across brilliantly, but show me the money, as they say.
Show me the money.
If you wouldn't mind.
We're still Friedman, right? Sticking to the profit. But Karri is right. It's not just the search of understanding your footprint better and working with your suppliers that will help you find inefficiencies. And they definitely did. But the big headline number for me is that when we started this about 2.5 years ago, we by now halved our carbon footprint, and not even talking yet about water and chemical footprint, because that went further down. But our profit went 5x. And this is despite having eyes on what we call a green premium in Bill Gates terms of almost 6%. So I'm spending millions by choice on better fibers and fabrics, which I do not pass on as a cost to the customers. But on the other hand, I found so many efficiencies, and I can drive down my marketing costs so much. My discount is almost half from where it was last year, and that was already half from where it was the year before, that it's bloody good business. And that's the key message here. If you are serious about it, it can be good business.
And what did that mean in principle? You halved your carbon footprint in 2 years. What did that involve? Where were the big wins?
Well, in the end, it's not just scope 1 and 2, which is basically what you control yourself, because, for most businesses, that will be less than 10% of your real footprint. But it's both upstream, where did the garments come from? What do we know? What's been the impact in the whole production getting to this point? And it's the downstream, what happens with the garment after its life. And there's some quick wins, go plastic free. That makes some immediate gains. You can do this. Extend the life of the garment, another good way of going. But typical in fashion, it is about focusing on what is the fiber you're using. To put it simple, are you using synthetics or do you use natural fibers? And if you use natural fibers, do you use cotton or do you use organic cotton? All of which have a much better footprint to the planet, but they're much more expensive.
Yeah, no, noted, understood. Question comes in from Alistair Cook. Could be to any of you. For a lot of smaller businesses, ESG is perceived as a cost that can only be borne when profitability allows. Is that an excuse or a point well made? Who'd like to have a quick crack at that? Someone, I could get Geoff more on this, but I'd like someone else. Susan.
I think that, one of the biggest things that any business can do is relook at energy, their energy usage. That's, clearly in their control. We never expected it, but renewable energy now is more cost efficient, is cheaper than fossil fuel and gas. And, that just doing that, if you take what costs you saved, you start to create a budget in which you can invest for anything that does cost. Yes, some things may cost, but down the line, you will have significant savings by moving to this. Not to mention, you'll have a business that's still running. So I think there are real ways of dealing with those things that cost by just getting the low-hanging fruit that exists out there already.
Yeah, all right. I'm getting some interference in my brain because the team are one step ahead of me. They put our next question up, which is: do the panel? This is coming to you, Rob. Do the panel see a point when green solutions gain the economic advantage? And here we go. And something. What's that? And the motivation to adopt is built into the P&L. There you go. As I throw my notes around me, Rob, what do you think about that? Is that a bridge too far?
I think, and on the earlier point, I think for smaller businesses it can be challenging, but if you look at your processes, you will find the savings, and then it's reinvesting those. So I completely agree with Susan on that, and that's what we've done. So, and look, we are going to spend as a company between now and 2030 £7 million on achieving our net zero targets.
Yeah.
But that comes with an economic benefit in our modelling of 10 million. So there is some cost up front, but our profits will continue to grow and will actually be more efficient as a business at the end of this. So as a CEO, you've got to take, okay, there is a bit of cost up front, but it also is about the planet. So if we don't all put a bit of cost and effort in, there won't be anything to enjoy. So cost up front, benefit longer term. And that doesn't matter whether you're a small business or a huge business. So I think the benefit is in the P&L. It is slightly longer term. But if you want to get the ball rolling, look at your processes. You will find cost savings that you can reinvest into your sustainability agenda.
Yeah. So you, Rob, it sounds to me like you are backing this win-win thesis. You're not saying to your board, look, we are going to have to take something off the table here. We are going to have to give up some of our future success. Our Prime Minister might commend you for for having your cake and eating it, but you think that's possible?
Yeah, we really do. Look, but you can't get away from it. Is cost up front, and the benefit comes longer term. But equally, as a consumer-facing businesses, people are starting to vote with their feet, and we want to be at the forefront of that. So if you don't move, you are going to absolutely get left behind. The consumer will move past you.
Yeah, and actually, Geoff, I suspect you're going to have a reframe on this, which is telling us about where the real risk really lies, actually.
I think it is. I mean, you can really not behave like an ostrich, and I applaud Rob and how Susan talk about it, and actually all of us. But I think the world is going to shift so fast from a consumer's point of view, what they're looking for, from employees, where they want to work, what kind of purpose-led businesses they want to work, and legislation through tax, through carbon taxes, or any disguise of it coming down, basically forcing businesses to include in the P&L the true cost of carbon and water. It is a must. It is your single biggest risk as a CEO right now. If you do not take serious how you're going to cope with that new reality, you're dead in the water.
Yeah, no, it's powerful stuff. So we've got about 8 minutes left. So thank you if you've been sending in your questions. Karri, why don't we just give us your thought starter on measurement? Because for certain types of accounts, you could exchange accounts with accountants everywhere around the world and they'd know what you were talking about. It can seem in this space like people are talking 100 different languages.
That's one of the biggest risks. It's an alphabet soup. You got SASB, you got B Corp, you can choose the UN Sustainable Development Goals as your framework. There's so many ways to approach it, and that's what. Every time I start talking, the lights go off here as well. By the way, that's not sustainable building for you. The blinds go up and down by themselves. The lights go on and off, and so on. But it's very, very hard to find what's right for you. So the advice we're giving, particularly to smaller companies, is look at what's right for you. Where I think Rob said it best: get the ball rolling, start measuring, and make incremental changes, and just change your mindset. And you don't need, if you're a small company, you don't need to have a board with 6 members all representing the different brackets to hit the G. But if you're a fashion business, start looking at how you treat your workers, how you where you get your materials from, and how long lasting your product is. Go from fast fashion to slow fashion. That has a way bigger impact than anything else you can do. All
right, Karri, but I'm going to push you on this because you can say, choose what's right for you, but it is a bit Yoda, isn't it, to say that? It's, so give us a bit more of a firm steer, and then I'd like others to say, and by the way, Susan, I'd like you to take us into chapter 0 on what are becoming some of the norms on this and what people are gravitating around. But Karri, come on, I'm going to push you one further. Any framework that seems to be coming through?
Well, personally, I like the B Corp framework. I think it is most applicable as a general framework for companies, rather than a very sort of focused on certain industries where, you know, some things just aren't relevant. We've been going through this process ourselves as a firm, and look, we're an investment bank, we're a people business. We have very little environmental impact. We can measure it, which we do. We use an external effort to benchmark it. We try to reduce where we can. We put the policies in place to do the reduction, and then we offset the rest that we can't have a physical impact on. But really, measuring our own business on E is a little bit pointless. We obviously need to do it. But where we have impact is on the S. So it's about how we can bring people from disadvantaged backgrounds into the industry, gender equality, so on, almost 40% female, not at the right levels, mind you, yet, but hopefully over due course we will be. But we do have a female CEO.
Yeah.
So that's the point around, you know.
No, noted. I'm conscious of our time.
Do work.
Yeah. So Susan, give us your take on measurement, please.
Well, measurement is a real tough nut to crack, at least from a internal perspective. So, you know, if I was to incentivize Rob, what are the measures that I would put into his REM policy, his REM package? You have to deal with what you know today. And the change, I think, coming forward is the fact that you're going to have to adapt as you learn more to make the measures meaningful and move the dial with regards to emissions. But I think in terms of all of these acronyms, I get them all mixed up too. But finally, the government is coming down and saying TCFD is going to be there as a financial measure.
Yeah.
You know,
so this is the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures. Exactly.
And it's one of many. And I'm not. I don't have a finance background, so I turn to people like Karri to help me on these. It's as good as it's going to get. As far as I'm concerned, it's put it on the agenda. You know, we talk about things now because we have to report on them, which, to be honest, is a bit ass before elbow, because you want the strategy before you report. But if it gets it on the agenda, I'm fine with that. So TCFD is what we're talking about at the moment, and what that means from a corporate point of view, reporting, and it exposes where we've got the issues. So I'm happy with that.
And it goes back to those big levers. What can we expect from, you know, the Treasury on this in terms of what is expected? Rob, of course, the billion-dollar question is, you know, what have you made of this advert for B Corp that's been put forward by Geoff today? Revolution? Can we
that is certainly an aspiration of ours. So on measurement, we've gone science-based target to really understand where we're going. We've just today heard back that our carbon disclosure project that we submitted in, we've scored a B. That's the first time there's 13,000 companies, I think, in the UK have submitted. That's the first time we've got a B. Clearly, we're looking to move to an A. So there's lots of different things, but ultimately, we've, as an exec team, decided B Corp is our route. We are very early on that stage, but listening to the conversation today, I'm even more encouraged that is the right path for us as a business.
There you go. Right. No, well, Josh's phone is probably going to be ringing off the hook. Thank you, Geoff, for inspiring us on that. Okay, final couple of minutes. Somebody tuning in, hopefully they'll be sharing this and tagging us in and all that. But on a serious note, they want to say, how do I really kick this up the agenda in my next board meeting? You know, we've come off the back of COP26. We've really got to get real with this. Give me your final rallying call. Karri, what do you say? And then we'll go Geoff.
I say, don't be afraid. It affects everybody. And not being perfect on day one is not the goal. It is about incrementally improving. And in order to do that, you need to measure.
Right. So thank you, Karri Vuori. Geoff van Sonsbeeck, how do we go from words to action? Are you with me, Geoff?
It looks like I
think Geoff has lost us briefly, so we'll bring him back. Rob, you go. Good man.
I guess what I did with my team is I encouraged them all to read A Life on Our Planet by David Attenborough. Because if anything's going to get you in the mood to move on this, that is a book that will make you do it. And then there's no arguing post that. You will be moving.
No, 100%. We will share the link to that. I don't know if you can hear me, Josh, but we are after your final thought, if you can hear me. He can't see or hear anything. But oh well, if he comes in, he'll come in. Susan, tell us your final thought.
Is it okay if I finish with the same thing I started with?
Please.
For me, there's just one thing. It's just get on and do it. I mean, we've talked about all of these things. We've got wonderful examples of companies who are doing it. By the way, the added benefit on the B Corp is it gets the culture too to go along, which TCFD alone does not. But you just got to do it. You just got to start. You're going to make mistakes. The road to net zero is not a straight one. You're going to be taking rights and lefts, but you just got to get going.
How can we find out more about Chapter Zero, Susan?
Chapterzero.org.uk.
Brilliant. Kudos to you. Thank you. Geoff, you're back. Welcome back. The House of Geoff, welcome back. I'm just after your final thought, but particularly for the person tuned in who says, okay, enough talk. We need action tomorrow. I'm going into the board. Maybe I'm running it. Maybe I'm supporting it. Give us your final thought.
Well, my final thought is do some soul searching, be very clear about your purpose and the why. And if you have collectively agreed with that, with your board, your team and your stakeholders, put it in your articles. Once it's in your articles, the rest will happen. B Corp would be an efficient journey, but start here.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, Geoff van Sonsbeeck, thank you. Susan Hooper, thank you. Karri Vuori, as ever, brilliant to see you from our sort of home team at finnCap Group. Rob Pitcher, it's time to fire up that festive sauna behind you. And I wish you all a fantastic day. Thank you for joining me, Ollie Barrett at Inside the Deal. And thank you to our partners at Business Leader for being our brilliant hosts for this whole series. If you've enjoyed it, we'd love to know. Please tag us in, share this conversation, and stay tuned. Until next time, thank you for joining us. And until next time, goodbye.